A lot.
Yeah, it's suboptimal.
I can imagine. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was I got to see my parents, so that was good.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was uh, it was definitely a an experience. Yeah, what's going on with
Hmm.
y'all, with you?
Um, Met a listener to the show this weekend. Shout out Jess.
Nice.
What's up, Jess?
Hello.
She came out to this panel I did at the Chelsea History Festival, which was really fun. I was with like my friends Estelle and Zach,
Mm.
and we were talking about like women in history and how everyone is wrong about them. And it was like really
Hmm.
fun. But I was before I did the panel, I was like kind of worried because so when I say like Chelsea History Festival, it is at the Chelsea Museum, and you need to understand that this is like a military museum.
Mm.
And it's like attached to there's this very sweet thing which is called it's called the Chelsea Pensioners. And basically, if you were ever in the army and you're of retirement age, you can go live in this barracks
Hmm.
where they kind of like where you like I mean you can just like hang out with the bros
Yep.
essentially.
Yep.
And it gives you kind of like army style stuff, which I don't know, silent generation people are into. I'm given to understand. So like that's very sweet. But when you're like, and now it's time for a panel on women, like you just don't know how like that's gonna go down in a military history context.
A lot of
Yeah.
grunting, a lot of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
murmuring. There was a lot of murmuring.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we had a full house, and it all went really well. But I will tell you that, like, the full room of that, there were maybe like five dudes, and it's just like it's so incredibly interesting because basically, the minute you're like women, men are like, "Oh, this has nothing to do with me." Like, whereas it's like, women are always expected to be interested in dude things, and of course I am, right? But like, the minute you're like, "Oh, like, let's acknowledge half of the population of the world," it's like, nah. Let's not. And it's
Mm-mm.
just so funny because it just keeps playing out. It's like, we're improving in that we're talking about history and women,
Hmm.
but I don't really understand how we still make these guys, right? Like it's just absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Oh gosh, my mic is cut out. That's not good. Why is that? Why is that?
I don't know. Check to make sure it's the same thing in Audacity.
Yeah, Audacity's fine, so it's okay. All right, never
Okay.
mind.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
cool. Yay,
Yay.
having a nice time, having a great time. Yeah, so anyway, that was quite funny. Basically that's up what's up with me. I've just been working, brah. I turned in my book proposal to my publisher, so keep your fingers crossed for me.
Mm. Nice.
Difficult second book, baby. I don't actually want to write it. I just want to be paid to do the reading for it. Thanks.
Hmm. Hmm.
Thank you. Please leave me
Uh,
alone,
uh-huh. Yeah.
Mhm. Maybe I wish that I had the kind of money that you can go to like those writing retreats. Like there's places where they will just like take away your phone and you get to live in like a
Mm.
posh hotel and they feed you and it's like to shut up and write. I wish I could do that. That'd be cool.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
But then
How would I mean?
how would you stay up to date on all of the latest news and hot goss?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So like I'll tell you what. In the girls group chat, Abby just texted, let me, important thing that I would miss from Politics for You. Breaking. Liz Truss claims the underground transgender mafia were plotting against her and brought her leadership to an end. Quote,
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones really running this country.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I have
yeah. Yeah, and so, I would miss out on that, which is very
underground
important.
transgender
Transgender
mafia.
mafia.
Why like a lot of English PM former PMs speaking up recently. What aren't you guys supposed to be keeping a lid on these people? Like what's the deal?
I think that old Lizzie here, I think that she's trying to gun for like the crazy American conservative circuit. I think that that's what
Okay.
she's attempting to break into that. But
Yeah.
she labors under the illusion that many British people have that they could break America. So it's like I'm like, honey, Americans don't know about you. Like they barely knew about Boris Johnson. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's sorry. It's
You were
you
PM for
know,
5 weeks, dude. How are they going to know
no
about your ass, you know?
no no British person had the has the ability to break America because we're too insane. There's too many neuroses bound up in here for you to be able for you to with your puny has been island to do anything about it. No,
I
no,
mean this
we only respect raw power in this country, and by raw power I mean like whatever fucking, idiot strongman for capitalism
mm,
we
like
have going
this
up.
bitch is not George Michael. That's all I'm saying.
No,
Like she no.
she like you she fundamentally misunderstands, and it's like, yeah, a lot of conservatives do have like a mommy thing that they want, like they
Mm-hmm.
have a,
Mm-hmm.
but like it's not so that you can do anything in public. It's like,
No,
you know they
no,
yeah,
no.
you don't get to hang if you're in that, you don't get to hang out in public. That's not the thing you get to do. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, enough about Liz
Oh,
and
My good friend Liz. Oh, God
whatever,
bless
yeah,
her.
whatever brain worms are dying in there. All right. All right, here we go. Three, two, one. Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke Waters. And as always, I'm joined by Dr. Eleanor Yanniga. Today, we are doing the last in our Day in the Life series, a little delayed because of storms
Mm.
and everything. But hey, we're back, baby, and we are doing it. Okay, before we get there, we got a question from one of our patrons, Tarian, who says, "Hi, as an aspiring historian on Hellenism, I was astounded to find out about medieval Alexander romance that idealizes my sweet genocidal boy long after the first editions of the romance were written in the third/fourth century. But how was Alexander the Great received by medieval scholars and kings in general? Was he seen as an ideal to aspire to, or not remembered much at all?"
So he's remembered a lot is the quick answer. So, and I'm going to shout out a scholastic book that you could get out of the library because otherwise it is 95 quid. Fuck you,
Hmm.
academic publishing, which is called Medieval Narratives of Alexander the Great, Transmissional Texts in England and France. It is by Venetia Bridges. And so this is the one that I've read anyway, and it's pretty good. And she talks about a bunch of high to late medieval
Hmm.
Alexander narratives. The main ones are the Alexandrice, the Roman de Alexander, the Roman du Tout Chevalier, and King Alexander. So, quite a few.
Hmm.
And I've written a little bit about one of my favorite Alexander myths, which is actually about Aristotle over at the blog. Because a really common story medieval people liked was they liked to tell this story about how um basically, Aristotle was Alexander's teacher, and he was like, you were too into your wife Phyllis, Alexander, because you're definitely not gay. And and then Phyllis was like, oh, Aristotle's talking shit. So she flashed some ankle at him, and then he got really horny for her, and she was all like, oh, if you want to have sex with me, you got to let me ride you like a donkey. And so he did. And then Alexander found them in the hallway and was like, wife, are you riding my teacher like a donkey? And Aristotle is like, see, this just goes to show you that even wise men get incredibly horny and do pony play. Like, and we all, we all learned a lesson
It happens,
about that.
it's I
So,
don't even know where to go with it.
I mean,
I don't even
it's a really popular like art motif. They love to draw Phyllis writing Aristotle. That like because they like kink and this is what they like. So anyway, this is to say there are all kinds of interesting stories about Alexander. Most medieval people, our favorite one is this one of Alexander being put in like a glass sphere under the water with his cat,
Mhm.
of which there are many like cool depictions that you could go Google right now. But basically, as a general rule, yeah, they fucking love him. Of course they love him,
Mhm.
right? Like they're obsessed with him because, like that how big can Rome be? Question mark, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, for the same reasons that they love Roman shit generally, they love Alexander the Great, and he is somebody to aspire to be. But then you just get weird medieval shit in there like this,
Yeah.
as stated. So, they're still gonna be medieval with it. I'm gonna be real with you. They're gonna be medieval with it.
They're gonna
And
stick him in a submersible with his cat.
they are, and a chicken, I think, which I don't know, like my cat would not stand for it, but there it is. So yeah, do check it out. I think you can kind of like find various legends online and that sort of a thing. But if you can get hold of this particular book, I think you would really, if you're already like interested,
Mhm.
in Alexander Transmission, go check that out of your local library. Um, because I just don't think that you should pay 95 quid for it. Although you can get the ebook for 20 quid.
Mhm.
Academic publishing is such a fucking racket, brah.
Yeah, it seems like a mess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I like medieval Alexander because they're just like, yeah, sure. He was, he's totally just like he's moved beyond like a person in his own time, and he's completely a person out of time. He's like
Mm-hmm.
in the sixth century, he's, the pagan ideal, and in the 10th century, he's the Christian ideal, and in the 14th century, he's chivalric ideal, and you're just like, yeah, cool, sure, whatever works, man. They
Yeah.
just yeah. Yeah, it's funny, like, everybody, like, you hear so much about Alexander the Great, and it's like, you, the stories, like, the actual history of it is so interesting. And then, but you have this guy, and he's like, there's like an Alexander in like culture, and then,
Mm-hmm.
historical Alexander, and he's just a completely different thing everywhere else than than what he actually was.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
medieval people though because they're out here on this Alexander is a scientist shit and I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. Like, it's not Alexander the Great.
Homer, I've got someone here who can save us. This is scientist. But Alexander the Great is a scientist. It's not Alexander the Great.
It's like
Yeah.
this is you basically have to say that to medieval people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, no, look, he's in his little submersible, and like, what are you going to do? Tell him their little woodcut's wrong? Do you know how long it took that guy to do that woodcut? Like, fucking ages for you to just, so, it's just,
I mean, I'm just saying ball and tattoo alert. Like,
yeah.
Alexander and his little armor sphere. Come on. Come on,
Mm-hmm.
Torion. Come on.
Mm-hmm. That's
A,
awesome.
get this
Yeah.
tat. B, show it to me.
Be Yeah,
Show me that shit.
teach the kids about the real Alexander the Great with gay sex and
But the
I
armor,
don't know,
I choose to
genocide.
believe the sphere
Yeah,
is
but
real.
the sphere, yeah, totally real. Everything
Headcanon,
else, all of the other insane shit about him fighting gods and demons, not real.
not
But
real.
him like living for a long time in an armillary sphere under the sea with a
Correct.
cat
Yes.
in what is essentially a medieval version of the movie Alien. Actually, I guess it's technically Alien 3. But
I
yeah,
mean, but who's
there you go.
counting?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Torian, thank you very much for the question.
Thank you very
If
much.
you want to ask us questions where we definitely don't go off the rails at all, then please
No.
do subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/WNSD pod. Get 2 bonus episodes a month. You get all of our regular episodes ad free. You can ask us questions. You can check in on the Discord. Yeah, it's a lot. Check it out. Patreon.com/WNSD pod. Got a new bonus coming out on Friday about a way in which we are actually very fucking different from our predecessors, and that is irony, or at least an aspect of it anyway. So yeah, we'll talk about that. And that'll be out Friday. And yeah, we got more good stuff coming, so check that out. And yeah, give us money. It'll be fun.
Yeah, it
Cool.
will. I love living.
I do
Yeah.
too, yeah.
Mhm.
So on to the main show. So yeah, when we started our Day in the Life series, we initially were only going to do about 5 episodes, ending with the clergy, but we had a couple of additional requests come in, and decided to use those to do one last installment. Unlike the other episodes where we might focus on a few different aspects of life under the broader topic, like the various types of clergy or how things are different for richer and poorer merchants, there's no rhyme or reason to these. We just got a few different topic suggestions, and we're going to do short sections about them to close this one out. First, we're going to talk about the training regimen for the vaunted medieval English archers, like they're
Archer.
autist
Right.
and archers at the same time.
We out
They
here
might have
auction.
been
Yeah, they might look.
not here to
There
take
are a
it back,
lot of
but anyway,
things. There's a lot of things that we can hyperfixate on. Okay.
man,
And
it is
I for one support it.
yeah, it's going great here. Yeah, medieval English archers who were renowned for their skill while also being largely from the peasantry. Next, we're talking
Hmm.
about ladies in waiting. All that
Hmm.
waiting seemed pretty boring, so what did they do all day? Next, we will address the day of the humble household servant who also came from the families of peasant farmers, but had much different to-do lists than their family members, who we've already discussed. Then there's sailors. We're still a ways off from rum, sodomy, and the lash. So what did they do all day instead? And lastly, yeah, we'll talk about being a construction worker in the Middle Ages. We see so many gorgeous pieces of medieval architecture, but all of this
Hmm.
was built by poor workers under backbreaking conditions. So we're going to talk about how exactly how bad it really was, and also maybe about construction techniques of the time. Who's to say? All
Hmm.
right, yeah, let's get going. So, for our first topic, patron John Mott wanted to know about the training regimen for the much heralded English archers, also known as the longbowmen. How often did they train? What were they doing when they weren't training or fighting in wars? And how are they chosen? Is everyone supposed to expected to participate, et cetera, et cetera?
I love this question because I love the longbowmen. So basically, it within England, the way that it worked, if you're going to be a longbowman, so in particular, like the ones that we know the most about are the Kentish bowmen.
Hmm.
And you need to train every week if you're between 15 and 60. So it's like it's basically on a Sunday. Okay. And
Hmm.
that's how it works. So, the great majority of people kind of are bowmen, but they're also something else, as you've already got
Hmm.
to. Like they're also peasants, right? So
Hmm.
basically they are they're going to be doing this of a Sunday. This
Hmm.
isn't to say that there aren't kind of more professional bowmen.
Hmm.
The first time we have a recorded bowman in England, it comes from 1293.
Hmm.
And he is recorded. His name is Ivo Le Boyer.
Mm.
And he has to go before the court of the Abbot of Westminster. So that's like the first bowyer we ever have by name. So this guy, at least, his family have probably professionalized to a certain extent.
Hmm.
So if you get really good, there might be opportunities to have this be your profession as opposed to just being a peasant. But basically what that's going to require is like coming up through the peasantry system. So, either you've got a knack for this shit and
Hmm.
you just suddenly get better like from like one time a week, or maybe I don't know, this is what you do to wind down at the end of the day. You could just
Yeah.
also find it fun. And we know that there are a lot of people who are practicing. We got a cute law on the book. It's not actually that cute. From 1100, where Henry the First says that like all archers are absolved if they accidentally hit anybody who's passing by while they're training. Like, my bad. Oh shit.
Oh, my bad. And
Oh wow.
the
Ooh.
court's like, yeah, no,
Mm-hmm.
can't frame
Mm-hmm.
anyone for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So it's like, so basically, like we definitely know a bit more like about Bowman from the later medieval period. So like from the 14th century or so, because um Edward the Third did like a big change around of what levies are raised by the army. Okay, so it's like
Hmm.
basically, it's here we are, it's the Hundred Years' War, you know the deal. And so basically it's like it says that the minimum days that you can get requisitioned for are 40 days to a
Hmm.
year. And then you can be discharged and you could re-enlist if you want to.
Hmm.
And that kind of indicates that there's a paid professional army. And so we know more about Bowman from that. Right. So by
Hmm.
this time, there are people who it's like, oh, you can re-enlist. Like, it's an initial contract for this long, but you can re-enlist. So we know that they are professionalized at this point. Right.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah, that's an interesting bit.
Yeah, I do like it. I like, Sundays. They were like, all right, we got to get out
Mm-hmm,
there,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
can't go to lunch with the fam.
yeah, yeah. I
Gotta
think
go
that's
straight from the parish, grab a bag of, like mixed nuts or whatever from the house, and then
yeah.
go out to the oh fuck, I forget what they're called.
What is it called? An
Oh,
archery
yep,
shooting
that
range?
thing.
Shooting range.
Sure.
There you go. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but like yeah. But you're right. So it's gonna be like of a Sunday. You're gonna go to mass, and then you're probably gonna eat after that because you're kind of not supposed to eat before mass, right?
Ah.
So you're gonna eat afterwards, and it's probably like kind of a little bit of a picnicky style type deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got your
Mm-hmm.
cheese and your bread and your ale, and you're gonna run on out there. But I think that they like, it's one of these things where it's really difficult to say because on the one hand, it's re like required of them, but on the other hand, lads, lads, lads,
Yeah.
right? Like,
They're
this
like,
is
oh no, they're requiring even more archery practice. It's like, oh no, I hate
oh,
this.
you're like, oh, honey, I don't know. I've got a woo.
Yeah.
Looks like you're gonna have to milk the cow.
Yeah, I can't can't do it this week. Gotta practice. There could be a war over yonder field next week. Who's to say? It's like,
This is like medieval bowling league,
yeah.
you know. But I mean, I suppose if you professionalize though, you're doing it every day, right?
Yeah.
Like it's basically just like eat, sleep, arrow, repeat kind of deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean we do know that there were like traveling groups of archers that were professionals and do all that sort of
Hmm.
stuff. But yeah, it's for the most part probably, it's just a Sunday thing for a lot of peasants. They, get called over to do it. But, some people got into it professionally, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
that's kind of
It,
how it goes. Did anybody ever
yeah.
show up to watch them? They like, oh,
Oh yeah,
gotta
yeah,
show
yeah.
up and
Yeah, and like and also you kind of have you also have like a particular thing. So for example, on the continent where crossbows are more particular, like crossbowmen, that's like a guild that the bourgeois set up in order to
hmm
have like really big tournaments.
hmm
Because they want their own tournament, but they're not allowed to use other weapons. But like, poor people are
mm.
allowed to use bows. So they're like, well, we've got a crossbow guild. And then they set up crossbow tournaments and people love that shit. So yeah, we know archery contests absolutely exist and they
hmm
absolutely draw people in. And it's a way for the lower classes to participate in
hmm
sports, basically.
Yep.
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 Mm.
they the lower class learning how to split the arrow that was already shot into the target directly into the bullseye. So,
Hmm.
that's you can't do that if you're a noble. That's something only the lower classes can achieve.
You
It's a
goddamn
special
right.
press it's a special prestige ability only we get.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um yeah, so that's the archers. The last four suggestions come from I Would Whack 500 Moles, who listed about 10 suggestions for the Day in the Life series. Some that we've already covered, like troubadours back in the episode on musicians and itinerant preachers during the Holy Order series. But it was a good list, and we wanted to get to a few of them. So here we go. First up, ladies in waiting.
Hmm.
What what's like, what do they do? Like, what is it like? What are they waiting on? What
Yeah,
are they doing?
great question. They're waiting on people who are higher up in their retinue. Okay, so
Mm,
to be a lady in waiting, you have to be from the nobility. Okay,
mm,
so another thing that they are often called are like damisella, which is from where we get the word damsel.
mm,
And they do a couple of things. One of the things that they do is they function as a form of like conspicuous consumption,
mm,
right? So whenever you have like a big celebration,
mm,
or you have a large procession of some kind, if you're trying to flex that you are an important person, you have to have ladies in waiting. And
mm.
they've got to be fucking blinged out. It's like a squad
Yeah.
thing, and they've got to be like wearing incredibly fine clothes, and you kind of like go from place to place, and they do various things. So like for example, one of the queens whose name escapes me at the moment, cool story, Eleanor, when she got married, um, there is they she had like two ladies of waiting, like who were countesses and duchesses who were sitting underneath the table next to her feet
Hmm.
doing question mark. But she was like, yeah, bitch, you see, you like that shit? I got two
Hmm.
duchesses under the table. Can't even see them. You don't even need to fucking know
Man, how
where
like
Duchess might be. Yeah, yeah. Uh,
how weird and awful must it have been to be one of, like, you're just sitting under a table, like you and the other Duchess, like, hey, what's up? Hey, how's it
mm-hmm.
going? Like
Hey, yeah.
you're like a
Ooh.
dog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's rather a thing.
Yeah.
So like so you do that, right? Okay, and that's like one of the big things is that you can check you can just like be someone who's doing something like that. Now, you also do kind of like practical shit around the house,
Hmm.
which is usually sewing. There's so much sewing that goes on. So like stuff like sewing, and spinning and weaving. These are things that ladies in waiting do all the time. And we've got lots and
Hmm.
lots of images
Hmm.
as well. So those like we can see that people are expected very particularly to be kind of like engaged in the feminine crafts.
Hmm.
And you just need, like, I mean, a lot of things, right? They're probably not going to be making their own dresses, but they might embroider their own dresses.
Mm.
But they might also just like embroider handicrafts. They might be making tapestries for things. And they just kind of like hang out like while people play lute music for them and they like work
Hmm.
and do these things. But you usually are like in the chamber of the lady that you're waiting on while you
Hmm.
do this, right? So, it's just kind of it can be kind of a profitable thing for a court to have. But again, it's also a flex. It's like, look how many
Hmm.
fancy ladies are like just in here embroidering all day. We have some interesting correspondence from ladies in waiting back to like their mums, like from teenage
Hmm.
girls, which is particularly funny, where they're like, Mom, I need more money for like dresses and all this stuff. And they're like, well, you sent me to France and everyone's way fancy here and you need way more things here than you do in England. And I don't look good. And if I don't look good, then I'm not like doing my job right. So but you might also be doing things within that, like the looking good thing. That's a really big part of it.
Hmm.
But you also do like a lot of moving correspondence around.
Hmm.
So, like, if a queen wants a letter to get somewhere, she might give it to a lady in waiting and be like, you take
Hmm.
this, right? And so if she's trying to get it somewhere without like prying eyes, they are often sent to negotiate on
Mm.
behalf of the women in their households. So it's high level political stuff. It's just, politics is really different to the way we see it. I mean,
Yeah,
one of the major things you're attempting to do though, is get married. That's like, you
true.
know, like, your parents, like a house puts you up and then they show that they are very fancy indeed. And look at all these pretty ladies I can have. Your parents then kind of clothe you in things. And it's kind of like finishing school. It's like you learn how to be the fanciest bitch possible.
Hmm.
And hopefully you attract a good match as a result of this refining period in your life, as a result of making political connections, as a result of just kind of like being in the mix more often. So,
Hmm.
if you are from a family of like the lower nobility, you just send your kid to the highest possible one you can get into.
Right.
Higher nobility, they'll send their kids to the king's court, things like that. But is there a massive difference between being at the court of the Duke of Burgundy and being at the court of the King of France? Not really.
Yeah.
Like because those are two fancy motherfucking courts.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Oh yeah, no, but it's like but then within that you can also see like the politics of it, right?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
where you are a lady in waiting is also going to mean who your
Yeah.
alliances are going to be with as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all just layers of intrigue on top of layers of intrigue, and it just that's how you have to, yeah, that's how you have to do politics during the day, for especially for like a lady or a queen. In most places it's going to be going
Hmm.
to be more backroom deals and
Hmm. Hmm.
nudging people in the direction you want to go or whatever. Yeah,
There's some there's
go
supposed
ahead.
to be a new book about this out. There's an older one that is specifically about damsels, but there's going to be a new one out at the end of October, by Caroline Dunn, whose work I really admire, which is going to be called Ladies in Waiting in Medieval England. So
Hmm.
that should be an exciting one. So keep your eye out for that.
Nice. Next up, we have household servants. They, were peasants who came to work for a noble, either in the city or, just from the surrounding area. Yeah, like, what it's obviously going to vary a lot by what they do, but what kind of jobs were these people doing for the nobles on a regular basis?
Oh my God, there's so many fucking jobs. Like this is the thing. Um, and they happen at so many different levels because houses are so big, castles are so big, and there's so much stuff going on, right? So you might be a stable boy,
Hmm.
and your job is like mucking out the stables, making sure the horses are curried, making sure that they always have like food and water, just like attending to
Hmm.
all the animals. This is a huge job, right? Like absolutely backbreaking work that you're going to be doing all the time. You might work in the dairy. This is a common job for young women, and be a dairy maid. And so you milk the cows and things, but you also kind of look after them, feed them. Then you process milk, you make butter, you make cream, you separate things out like this, and then you also just kind of like do whatever the fuck. Like, I mean, all of these are like, whenever there are like other reasonable duties in like job ads now, it's like that too. It's like plus they'll just make you do whatever the fuck at any given time. Scullery maids are how you start out in the kitchen.
Hmm.
And you basically start out scrubbing floors and pots and filling pans of water and like moving things from one place to another, kind of like being a busboy or something like that.
Hmm.
And indeed, oftentimes there are men working in the kitchens as well. There are young women. You are just as likely to have a cook who's a man as you are a woman,
Mm.
really. Like this is like one of these places where there's kind of like 50-50 on this. So because much as now, it's like if you're being really fancy indeed, maybe you have a chef. Right. And so it's like, like if something has been professionalized to a high level, men might be there, even if it's
Hmm.
considered a feminine job. So you kind of work your way up as like from scullery maid to kind of like being an assistant chef to being like a head chef. And there can be any number of people in a fucking kitchen, right?
Hmm.
Just like scrubbing. all the time. So like
Yeah.
depending on the size of the house, it's absolutely huge. You then have chambermaids. So chambermaids, they are doing more kind of like making beds, mending things. Like there's so much mending,
Mm,
dude. There's so much fucking mending to do. So they are going to be doing like the sewing and the stitching.
hmm
And they are kind of in more intimate spaces. So it's a little bit more of a high prestige job. You might even make clothes for the people that you work with.
hmm
So you might be like outfitting people. That's a major one. You have people like pursers who look after the household finance and the budgets, and all day long they look at the incomings and outgoings of like in particular the kitchen. Like how much are we
hmm
eating? What have we brought in? What do we need to buy? How much like has gone
hmm
out? That's a huge job to do. There are people who are looking after the livestock who are just kind of like doing regular peasant things. There's going to be people who are taking care of the garden because there's always a garden in addition to agricultural whatever where you like grow your herbs or
hmm
flowers. Like if you're at a great house, they like to have a flower garden quite often. And so like somebody's got to keep that up. So like being a gardener, that's just like a job, right?
hmm
So basically, if you kind of think about any drama you've ever seen, like, I don't know, Gosford Park or whatever, and you're like, damn, there's this whole like staff of people working. Yes. Same thing in the Middle Ages, except that, like, I mean, you'll have bath maids, right? Whose whole fucking job is just heating up water and drawing baths from people all goddamn day long,
Yeah.
right? Which is a real shit one. Like, we'd hate that.
That yeah, that sounds yeah, I just the amount of time you have to fill and then just, your job being like um you know, filling up the trough every
Mm-hmm,
15
mm-hmm,
minutes or whatever, and you just like, damn, that
mm-hmm.
fucking
It
sucks.
does. It sounds like it fucking sucks. And it's like for the most part, you live there as well. Like
Yeah.
in the countryside, you might be a dairymaid and like you go over to work and then go back to your parents' house if it's close enough by. But for the most part, like within a city context, you live in the house. You're a member of the household.
Yeah.
That's where you're registered. And so that's like it's there sleeping on a bench in the kitchen and you wake up before dawn to
Yeah.
get the fire going and start making bread, right? Like
hmm
that's your job. And like it is just kind of like it is expected that these are live-in positions, right? I mean, I guess
Yeah.
there's also like shout out wet nurses. There's also like people who are just like fully feeding rich people's babies.
Yeah.
And they're often live-in, but not always. Like sometimes people are just like, get this baby away from me. I'll see it when it's weaned or
I'll see
whatever.
it when it's older because
Because
yeah.
I'm a rich person and I
Because
am horrible,
yeah.
like yeah. So like
So
people like that, like literally,
yeah.
using their bodies in this way to
Yeah,
do
do
it. Yeah.
they yeah, so most of them they would kind of stay at the person they would kind of
Hmm.
stay like on the premises, so they wouldn't go
Hmm.
they wouldn't like commute or whatever.
No, most of them are going to be like specifically on the premises, or perhaps in if it's rural and we're talking about a castle, they might be in like small houses kind of outside the castle walls
Mm,
and kind of
okay.
like go in and out at
Okay.
various times. But for the most part, they're going to be living in kind of like the small buildings inside of a castle, like not
Yeah.
not in the fancy rooms with everybody else, but like, the wooden ones outside,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Sounds like yeah, sounds pretty awful.
Yeah,
Awful way to live.
I would not like to do it myself. But
No.
like I guess that you got access to pretty all right food and things. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I never want to trade with any of these guys, right? Like,
No,
yeah.
yeah, I don't want to go and do any of that. It sounds
No.
awful. All right, we got a couple more. Next up we got sailors. So
Mm.
I can't imagine it was great because if the jobs on land sound awful, the jobs at sea are always much worse sounding. So, like, what is life like on a medieval ship? I assume. I assume they're not all still chained down in the galley or whatever to
No.
row, but
No, but it's like this is one of those ones where you still have, much in the way that we kind of have now. There's like a lot of rank
hmm
involved in sailing. So it's like how much money you're bringing in
mm,
depends on what's going on. So it's like if you're like a common sailor, you're not very making very much, but like, look, you're married to the sea,
yep.
right? But if you're like a first mate or you're like the boatswain who looks after it, then you might be
Yeah.
making a lot more money, right?
Yeah.
So basically the main things that are going on are in the first place just the handling of the vessel, like making sure that we are staying afloat. But then
hmm
also like pirates
Yep.
definitely exist.
hmm
So there is an amount of combat that involves, right? So and we have a kind of differentiation in between how the boats are being sailed and also the amount of fighting that might need to happen. So like obviously up north you have more influence from Viking ships in the way they are. So you might still be rowing more often.
hmm
Whereas like Mediterranean vessels are usually kind of like they've just been keeping ships going, like ticking
Yeah.
over since the Roman period, right? So it's a lot more like that.
Yeah.
Um, which are not as good, but like, hey ho, whatever. So basically, like you'd have in the period, even like you do now, unfortunately, still, but like a Shanghaiing people
hmm
still was a thing. So you might like just fully get like kidnapped and forced onto a boat. And like that's like a thing.
Yeah.
And like, you might be someone though who is in it professionally and you are a sailor and that's your thing. You might be someone who is like on the boat doing other things as well, right? So
hmm
you might be the cook that's on
Yeah.
there. You might be kind of like one of these people who's enlisted more specifically for military purposes. Or you might like have a job that is just specifically like, oh, I'm like I look after the sales. Now, having said this, you also have like people who are running around like doing kind of like vermin control,
hmm
rather a lot of ratting that goes on. And so there are things like that, just kind of like trying to keep the boat ticking over. And you'll also have people there who are more specialist tradesmen. So they'll be kind of like the people who
Hmm.
are like doing the actual sailing of the boat, but oftentimes you'll have people who are like, I am entrusted with a cargo and I'm on this boat, or like I am looking after my own business interests and that's why I've come along. And you're not quite a sailor, but you're not quite a passenger,
Yeah.
if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So it's like, I mean, it's pretty scary,
Yeah.
but people do it all the time. And fundamentally, like a lot of the time, you're not in ships for like ages upon ages. Like when I read things from like the 18th century, that makes me want to kill myself. Like when I think
Yeah.
about these guys who are just like, come on, guys, we're going to try to sail around the Cape of Good Hope. And it's like, no, thank you. Right. Like,
Everything where like people were talking about sailing and like we journeyed with Captain Cook and blah blah blah, and it's like the like it takes for fucking ever to get to like Easter Island. Like you, what are you like? No, God, no. Like, oh
mhm.
yeah, it's a 4 year voyage. 4 years on a boat?
Yeah, yeah.
Fuck
But
off.
and they're little, right? Okay, so like
Oh.
Here in London, over by London Bridge, they have a replica of the Golden Hind, which was Sir Francis Drake's ship. It was like the first European to
hmm
circumnavigate the globe. It's so small, bro.
Mm.
Like it is so fucking small. And it's like you're just in there for years upon years with a bunch of like no. Like I can't
The
stand up in it fully. Like the beams are
this
just like at my forehead and stuff.
you're on a stinky disease riddled like little shanty with like 60 other dudes and you're just oh god ugh.
Yeah. But like from an Afro-Eurasian perspective, at this point in time in the Middle Ages, you're on smaller voyages and you're doing a lot
Yeah,
more hopping, right? There's a lot more like hugging the coastline
yeah,
as a general rule of thumb. So you might be like out in the open water sometimes, like if you're going from, I don't know, Rome to Alexandria,
yeah,
or like somewhere in what is now Malaysia to
yeah.
Sri Lanka. But you're gonna be doing like a lot of hopping. you
Yeah,
know. So
yeah,
it's not going to be that bad.
yeah, you were talking about like, people being press ganged into stuff
Hmm.
where they're like guilds or other places that like catered specifically to ships, like for like, people who could work on a ship or whatever, like, oh, this person knows how to deal with the rigging or,
That is
whatever.
a great question, and I don't really know, is the answer. I think I know that there's a worshipful company of shipwrights.
Hmm.
So very specifically, like here in London, because there's always going to be one of them, right?
Yeah.
And I know about them specifically because like they're based specifically in the Ironmonger's Hall, which is kind of like the Barbican is built around it.
Hmm.
So I walk by it all the time.
Yeah.
Which is why I know. So it's one of their earlier ones. So we know that it is like definitely in the record by 1387.
Hmm.
And that kind of thing. So shipwrights themselves, so like people who are building ships, yes, absolutely. Like sailmakers or guys like that, I don't know so much, but I know that
Hmm.
like the process of building ships, yeah, 100p.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like within a Viking context, we know that like women make the sails. It's just like just
Mm.
everybody, it's kind of like a communal thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
just thinking like, you got, famously like, you got like a plank between you and like, and the embrace of the dread embrace of the deep or whatever. And it's just like, well, yeah, we're out here and we have to have these ships to keep things going. But at the same time, like every one of these ships is manned by people that like we pulled out of like out of like an ale barrel,
Yeah.
somewhere, and like that's the guy who's like keeping every like even right now that cognitive dissonance is like giving me like an existential dread that's like making me like scratch my skin, like I'm just like, oh, oh
Hmm.
God, oh,
Yeah,
no.
like it's awful too because it's like, a lot of people who are on ships and things, they're like, "Oh, I'm a very fancy lad. Take me to Rouen,"
Yeah,
or like whatever. And you must be so hardcore, like, fuck you
yeah.
when you have been press
Eh,
ganged, you know.
yeah, and you think about like stuff on the land, like, okay, it most people today would be terrible farmers. We'd just be terrible at it. The hours, like all the
Hmm.
stuff you have to do, be terrible at it. However, you can teach a person to farm. Like
Oh
you
yeah.
can. It's
Hmm.
not like it's not rocket science. It's not stuff that is completely foreign to like how like human interaction or whatever. You can't teach most people to like sail after a certain point. Like it's not a there's nothing that's like that in like the land-based world. Like like it's completely you're just dealing with a completely different medium of existence almost.
Yeah, but Luke, you can't teach the romance of the sea. Okay? Like
When it's
so
when it's wine dark, you gotta
you
like
gotta
when
get
the
it.
sea
Yeah, I
I
just
every go
fully.
ahead.
I think that like a lot of people get kidnapped or whatever, and it's like sometimes
Yeah.
you just die real quick,
Yeah.
or like something happens. But also there is kind of to an extent a possibility within sailing that doesn't exist like within serfdom. Where it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
well, where it's like you're also again unfree in a way, but if you stay on, you can work your way up.
Hmm.
Like there are ranks on a ship that you can work your way up in a way that is like highly regimented. So you can say, okay, well, I can do this, I can do that. You are not down on the farm.
Hmm.
Go interesting places, meet interesting people, and have sex with them. That's available
Hmm.
to you, like when you're a sailor, which is much less available to
Yeah.
somebody who is like living on a farm in like Lanarkshire or something, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean it's just it's completely different. And it's I mean it's a completely different life and that you're right, but like I also like kind of think of the guy, just like the drunk who like, happened to be hanging outside of the wrong tavern at the wrong time and just gets pulled on there and all he wants to do is like sleep and the
Ugh.
captain looks out at the sea and he's like, "Oh, it's a wine dark sea tonight." He's like, "No, I just wanted a quiet night in." He's so fucking mad. He's like, "God damn it, just Oh, I'm so tired of adventure. Ah,
Like you better not fucking romanticize the sea to me,
no, you
right?
better
Like,
not. He's just so angry.
definitely I wouldn't want to be a sailor. We
Mm,
talked about it before. I'd kind of like to be a
yeah,
merchant a bit because I like the traveling
yeah,
aspect and the running around. And you'd end up on boats a lot. But like,
yeah.
we also hear from like people's travel logs. They're like, yeah, that fucking sucked. Like whenever they're on boats, they're
Well,
like, it's
yeah,
not
like it
fun.
would,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I can't, I can't imagine, like, yeah. And it's just like you were talking about it, but like going back in time and being like above like 5'10" is gonna put like you in
Fucked, man.
severe,
Yeah.
like that's gotta be what it's like walking around as being like Shaquille O'Neal for like, normal people. You're just walking around and the door is built for someone who's 5'6" and you're like, is this a fucking joke? Like, what are we doing here? Like,
100% like I would not fit on boats. Like I just
no, no.
it would be a whole thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
anyone, like if like you're approaching like 5'10", you are towering above these people. You are fucking giant. Yeah, it's
Epigenetics is real, people. What
well,
can I
yeah,
say?
it's
Yeah.
yeah, we lost all those inches after we gave up being
Hunter
hunter
gathering.
gatherers, and
Yeah.
now it took us this long to get them back.
Turns out that was a bad move.
Yeah. Turns
Civilization was a
out,
mistake.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. At least this kind. Yeah. All right, here we go. Last one. Construction workers. So like if I think about a medieval construction worker, the two things I think about is A, God, that sounds horrific and horrendous and awful because of like all the stuff you have to do without
Mm.
the tools that we have, but also like how fucking annoying would it be like if you were like on a cathedral project in Rouen or something, and like there's no chance it can be completed in your lifetime. So you're just gonna be working on this thing until like the day you die, and like you don't even get to see it.
Yeah, I mean
Maybe your
that
son does or whatever. Like,
yeah, fully that's fucked. But like it's also a really good job because it's stable.
oh
It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like so you're just going to be working on this all the time. Whereas a lot of stonemasons and builders like this, they usually move around from church to church.
Right, right.
And it's large. So, like, a thing to keep in mind is that few things are made out of stone if they're not like monumental. So,
Hmm.
churches, city walls, castles, all of these things are opportunities for builders. For the most part, like I mean, in cities, you are going to have carpenters and things that will
Right,
will will
right.
knock things up, and there are builders in that sense, certainly. And the carpenters are a very skilled trade, and they're building things a lot of the time. But otherwise, I interviewed a guy who is a stonemason who also is like he repairs medieval churches. Fucking cool ass
Hmm.
guy. I was like, I'm gonna stalk you, sir.
Yeah.
Um, and you kind of go. He was like, yeah, it probably takes about 3 years to make a parish church. And then you like make one, and then you kind of like move down the road to the next place that needs a parish church, and then you build that parish church, right? And so
Yeah.
you're just kind of like every 3 years you kind of pack up and move. Now you might be doing this all in Gloucester, like in
Hmm.
like the Gloucestershire area, and you're just kind of like doing it in like one place. And so we can see like a vernacular of churches arises. We can kind of tell, oh, like I think that this church was made by the group who did that church because this, that, and the other is in common,
Hmm.
right? Whereas if you're building Rouen Cathedral, it's like, well, that's a job for life, right?
Yep.
And now we know a lot about this because there are a lot of rules about heritage here in Europe
Yeah.
when you've got medieval things, and it's like you gotta kind of do it the same way. So when like I went and met the stonemasons who work on Canterbury Cathedral, they're still doing everything by hand, homeboy. Like
Amazing.
they're like when you are making like the stone blocks and stuff, they've got a motherfucking chisel and several chisels, several mallets, and they're just going plink, plink, plink. They're like drawing things on paper and then they put it on the stone and then they just like plink away. Granted, they have the advantage of stuff like forklifts and shit, you
Right,
know.
right, right.
So
Yeah.
like, they don't have to like move these things up and down where it's like there's a lot more grunt work for medieval people, but you do have cranes,
Right.
for example, which are quite cool. And like either there's dudes kind of like pushing the winch, or sometimes you put a little donkey in like a donkey hamster wheel. which is sort of
I yeah,
adorable.
I've
Yeah.
seen. I think I've seen representation. Yeah, of
Yeah,
that. Like
I saw a donkey hamster wheel once at a castle on the Isle of Wight. And it's
that's
like
awesome.
it's like the donkey's job, like he just it's like a well or something, and the donkey basically gets like brings the thing up and down and then gets several sugar lumps and is a very happy donkey. But you know that you have stuff like that. But yeah, you know, there aren't jackhammers and things.
Yeah.
It's just like you just got regular ass hammers. And so it's really backbreaking. A thing that this dude I interviewed the other day said to me that I thought was so cool is that like one of the things he knows a lot about is what people ate for lunch. And he's like, it's oysters. And I was like, well, how do you know that?
Hmm.
And it's like, well, you build the walls of like a church or whatever, right? So you build the walls, but then there's usually kind of like a
Mm.
gap in between, and you just kind of like fill them with like whatever.
Yeah.
So like you throw in rocks or whatever. It's like sometimes called riprap, where you just kind
Yeah.
of like throw things in to kind of like fill up this gap. And they would just like chuck their oyster shells in there. And he's like, so many oyster shells. Oh my God, oyster shells. Like homeboys are just like, well, time for lunch. It's 3 dozen oysters, right? And they're just like throwing this shit down there.
Half the work team is like out. They're like, oh God, oh we got a bad batch.
I know,
Oh
right? Like
yeah.
imagine. But it's a shit job, 6 days a week, Sundays off.
Oh.
You know, like, but and of course, like feast days, blah blah blah, which there are a lot of and that kind of a thing. Uh, but it's a pretty intense one. But then there are also like there's differences because there's like master builders and then like
Hmm.
the grunt work guys. So for example, we know, especially in the later medieval period, about the names of certain master builders. Like there's my boy Peter Parler, who is largely responsible for Prague Cathedral as well as Tin Cathedral in Prague. And like he's got a very
Mm.
specific vernacular style. So he's a lot more like drawing up plans and like you know a lot more
Hmm.
like what we would call an architect.
Right.
So but that's like for the master builders to do.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's it's just interesting because of the you know, a lot of this stuff had to be overseen by people, but you've got, you've got random people just building the building what this master builder, architect or whatever has drawn out. And yeah, and I guess the question I had was like, for a lot of places, obviously you aren't like moving stone from a quarry like all the way across the island or across the continent or
Mm.
anything. But like, is there any of that like movement like over long distances to get like specific types of stone in?
Yeah, for monumental buildings like cathedrals and castles more commonly. So,
Hmm.
you know, like quite famously, marble gets moved around a lot.
Right,
Right. And
right.
like if you're really flashing your shit around, you're gonna move marble around, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of it comes very specifically from Italy, or
Hmm.
Greece. It's usually moved by ship,
Hmm.
because like obviously it is like, you know, like you're not gonna be like you're not like putting it on a
Surprisingly easier to move it by ship than it is by sticking it on the back of a donkey,
yeah, right. And then, you know, it would get into a port city and then it's gonna be kind of like brought along. Now, one thing is you would be surprised what a fucking port city is in the Middle Ages, like
Hmm.
versus everywhere else where it's like there was a lot land is filled in a lot.
Yeah.
Is all I'm saying is that a lot more things were port towns at the time than there are now. So things are a little bit further in than you would think. But that's only going to be for super fancy buildings, right? Like
Hmm.
that's for Westminster Abbey, right? And places like that. Your local parish church is going to be made and determined by what is around you. So, like, we have like a big thing in the south of England, for example, and especially in the southeast. Well, I guess it's true in the southwest as well, where a lot of churches are made out of flint
Hmm.
because we have like you know, like the White Cliffs of Dover and all that shit. That's
Hmm.
chalk. And like flint is in chalk. And so you will see these churches and they're just like lots and lots of nodules of like flint stones that they've
Hmm.
kind of like napped in half and they've like built
Hmm.
that in. Um and then kind of like mortared that in place.
Yeah.
And so too, I suppose this brings me to another point too. What you're doing all day depends on the season. So
Right.
because a mortar isn't going to set in the winter, what you do all winter is you create the things that you're then going to put in place. So you just sit there hammering away, like chiseling away, being like, okay, this is going to be like a big part of like this stone column for the nave. This is going to be this is going to be that. And you get all of your stones ready to rock and you like put them in place like it's a like a Lego thing, right? And you're like,
Hmm.
okay, yeah, I need this piece. And then the minute the weather warms up, you're like, bang, and you start moving things into place.
Yeah.
So because you can't get the mortar to set in the cold months, that is a specific summer activity. So what you're doing does vary based on season as well.
Yeah.
So there's the material conditions, but there's also the seasonal conditions as well.
Yeah. You just yeah, you can't build like that all year round. It doesn't
No.
work.
Uh-uh.
Yeah, yeah, none of these sound good. None of it. Like
Yeah,
every time we do this,
yeah.
everything about it, I'm just like, man, I respect these people so much. I
Right?
absolutely wouldn't trade. I would not trade
Not
a
a fucking
second of this
chance.
for that. But yeah, the archers, like that's not like of all of these that we've done, that one sounds like the most like kind of like,
You're
oh
more,
yeah,
but
we
you're
just
most
show
likely to be
up.
an archer.
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
No,
yeah.
oh God, no. I have terrible I have like an astigmatism. I can't like I have
Yeah,
terrible like
same, homie. Yeah.
short sight or whatever. Yeah. No, it's just like that one is the one that sounds the least awful out of this. Like, and it really sucks because like it's crazy that Sailor is like the one of these where you're like, well, I mean, I guess that might not be so bad, sort of. Like,
Yeah, like what? I suppose I'm mostly interested in like the fancy lad crafts. Like, I wouldn't mind being like a weaver or
yeah,
something, I suppose.
yeah.
Like, but there's no way I'm getting into the guild.
Guy, yeah,
So,
I'm
yeah.
the guy who I'm the only guy in Europe who's allowed by the church to design dick sucking marble statues. Everybody
That's
else,
right.
I'm the only one who can get the precise dimensions of the dick sucking down pat. No one else can. I have a letter
Mm-hmm.
signed from the Pope. Only
Mm-hmm.
I am the lone proprietor of self-stuck statues. If you want someone giving a hand job, that's fine. That's fine. But the second
That
that person's
self-sucks
sucking his own
statues.
dick, get him, get him out. I got the Pope. You're gonna get your ass excommunicated. Get out.
The worshipful company of
Yeah.
auto fellatio statuary makers. I'm
The
joining.
union. It's the
I'm gonna try to incorporate right now.
it's
I'm
the
writing to
guild.
the guild system here, and I'm gonna be like, "Hello, good sir."
Hello. Hi, oh, good day to you and yours, madam. You show up with like a big
Oh
top
god,
hat.
it's
They're
like,
actually, what the
"Hello,
fuck are you? Hello. They're
hello."
like, oh, great.
I
People from
represent I
the top hat
represent
society are here. Great.
several of the best self-suck artists from across Britannia.
A growing concern. We will go into the heart of deepest Asia. You're like, wait, what? No, whoa, this got a lot more racist than I thought. What are we talking about? Oh
Oh
man,
god.
it's like
Look, I'm just saying they add other guilds all the time. Like there's a fucking worshipful company of art historians. So what are they gonna be doing history about, brah? Someone gotta make the statue.
oh, like the Pope doing like a blind like statue test where he's like going through like three of them and he's able to tell the best one. He's like, no, the dick thickness is not good on this. You
Who did
got
you
it
get
way off.
in?
It's too thin. Nobody's sucking a hot dog here. Come the
I demand the girth and veiny
that girth
throbbiness that
and
only Luke of the Waters can provide.
only
Tar
only
and
the
feathering you for
only
like
the
having a
girthiest, yeah. They tar and feather me because I make the dick too veiny. They're like, no, it's too many veins.
it's a monstrosity.
It's, the kids. Oh man. Oh,
Oh, anyway.
everyone, thank you so much for listening to this ostensibly educational program. My name's Luke, and that's Eleanor, and you know what we're doing here. Thank y'all for
I'm a doctor.
I'm a I'm a doctor.
That's right.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm a doctor. Like, yeah, just
Doctor
like
suck my own dick statue. Anyway. Mm.
I wish that would be a great
Yeah. Yeah. Be a good one.
defending your master's thesis like a fucking boss.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for listening to the Day in the Life series. It was a blast. As we said, we'll be back on Friday with a bonus episode about irony, and then next week we are going to have a little two-part interview series with a guest, and we're going to be talking about some medieval traveling and Ibn Battuta. But yeah, we'll get to that next time. Eleanor, what's going on with you in the meantime?
I did write a blog
Nice.
about side hustles. It went up last Friday. I was basically hallucinating. Like I worked until 8:45 at night because I'm an idiot. But it's up there at going-medieval.com, where you can go read that. What the fuck am I doing with my life? Oh, I was on 10K posts with Phoebe
Nice.
and Hussein talking about online stoicism the other week, so you can go check that out. Otherwise, purchase the Once and Future Sex at all fine bookstores. Yeah, do that. That's cool.
Yep.
People like that.
Do it, yeah. Yeah, you can find me. Luke is amazing on the stuff. You can find me on Instagram, Luke is amazing zero, and yeah, you can find my old Star Wars show, People's History of the Old Republic, wherever you're listening to podcasts like this. Yeah, well, thank y'all so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
All right.
Okay.